Hello, and welcome to the Create a Life You Love podcast. I'm your host, Chantal Cox. My purpose is to empower and lift up others who know in their heart they're meant for more. More joy, more impact, and more passion. If you're ready to make a radical transformation and create a life that you love, then you have come to the right place. Let's do this. Hello, everybody. Welcome to today's episode of the Create a Life You Love video podcast, where we get to connect with people from all over the world to share tips and strategies to help you on your journey. So for those of you who don't know me, I'm your host, Chantal Cox. I'm an author, speaker, transformation neurocoach, and life purpose coach who specializes in helping women connect with their purpose so they can live an aligned and fulfilling life of impact. So quick reminder, this is being streamed live. So those of you with us, feel free to put comments and questions in the chat, and then we'll get to them as it makes sense in the flow of our conversation. If you are catching the replay, feel free to interact as if you are watching live and use hashtag replay, and we'll be sure to respond to you later. Okay, let's dive in. I'm so excited to be here tonight with Dr. Bob Saul, who has been guiding the physical, behavioral, and mental care of children for over 40 years. His Parental Awareness Threshold is a simple framework to actively parent with self-awareness, empathy, and compassion, where children learn to build nurturing relationships as well as exhibit love and respect for others. So hello, welcome.
Oh, I'm so excited to be here. Thank you for having me.
Oh, absolutely. And tell us where you're joining us from.
I live in upstate of South Carolina.
Okay, awesome. Um, and so give us a little bit of the background on you. How did you get to this point in your life? How have you created a life that you love?
Well, I've finished college and medical school in Colorado, did my pediatric training at Duke University, and then moved to South Carolina, where I've been ever since, to do pediatrics and medical genetics. And so I dove into pediatrics in the late 70s and genetics to be the best darn doctor you could be. And then in the early 90s, so about 14, 15 years into this, I felt like I wasn't paying back to my community. I was thriving off the community, but I wasn't paying back. And I went to hear a talk at the same time, and I heard 12 words that have had a profound impact on me ever since. So we're going to talk about those. For anything that happens in your community, I am the problem. I am the solution. I am the resource. So it's not their problem. It has to be my problem. I have to take ownership in it. It's not their teenage pregnancy problem. It's not their drug problem. It's not their homelessness problem. It needs to be my problem. And I need to be part of the solution. And to do that, I need to devote my resources to it. So it took me sort of several months to internalize that message. That is, what do I do with that? And then I went to the folks in the community and said, put me in, coach. I'm ready. I can do good work. I can use my pulpit as a respected professional in the community. I'm ready to go. And I was working and very excited, and maybe even smugly so, that I was doing so well. And then April 20, 1999, two students walk into a high school in Littleton, Colorado, massacre 13 people, and kill themselves. Columbine. I was shocked, and I don't know why that one didn't numb me like everything else, but it didn't. I asked myself, could it happen in my community? And the answer was yes. I asked myself, what have I done to make a difference? And the answer was not enough. So I put pencil to paper. Back then we used to do that, and wrote an op-ed article about what each of us could do to improve our community, and articulated what I called to be the 5 steps to community improvement. That really started me on a journey I had no idea I was going to be on. It's almost 30 years now. But I wrote to the local newspaper over 160 op-ed articles over the next 12, 13 years, articulating those 5 steps to community improvement. And with your permission, I'll go into those for you.
Yes, please. I was just about to ask. Yeah, I'd love to hear the 5 steps.
Well, they intertwine, so they're not independent, but I think I specifically chose these for a reason. First one, learn to be the best parent you could be. And I chose those words carefully. Parenting is a learning experience, and you're never done. Uh, and not everyone has the same abilities. So I want people to be the best parent they could be. Not everyone has the same abilities, sometimes because of their socioeconomic status, because of their mental health status, because of a variety of things. So my job as a pediatrician, was to try to help enable families to be the best parents they could be. Initially in my training, I would sort of tell people how to be the best parent they could be. And then I realized that wasn't my job, was to enable or to empower. And sometimes that was to gently peek behind the curtain to see how I could help them see better, as I could build a trusted relationship with them over time. Number two, get involved. Number three, stay involved. Now, you might say, well, those are the same. I think they're different. Sometimes it's easy to get involved. I think sustaining involvement can be very, very different and equally challenging. Number four is the most intuitive of these 5 steps, but seemingly the most difficult in today's society: love for others. In our divisive society where we go at each other because of this or that, it really is very difficult, it seems like, and it shouldn't be. Number five is actually the most difficult, and that's forgiveness. Learning how to practice forgiveness, learning how to forgive yourself, learning how to forgive others, and learning how to ask others for forgiveness, and doing it now so you can move on. And so again, over the 12, 13 years, as I wrote all those articles, and I would cycle through those. And as I wrote these articles, sometimes I would let my wife read them ahead of time. And she said, "Oh, I don't know about that one. That sounds a little preachy to me." And I said, "Well, you don't know who I'm preaching to." She said, "What do you mean?" I said, "Me. These are sort of I'm essentially journaling for myself, action steps, what I think should be done. And if it's helpful to somebody else, so be it." So I put all that material into a book called My Children's Children: Raising Young Citizens in the Age of Columbine. Because
Hmm.
I think what my bias is in terms of parenting is that we should be raising our children to be good citizens. Oftentimes, we talk about happiness. And when my parents divorced at a young age, I can remember my mom just saying, "Bob, I just want you to be happy. I just want you to be happy." And when my first marriage ended up in divorce, I just remember telling my oldest son, "I just want you to be happy." And fortunately for me, my mother was the good example, was the good citizen. So I now learned that just wanting to be happy isn't good enough, that I had to be ready to help care for others, care about others, care for others, exercise empathy, and exercise what I've recently heard of radical empathy. That is not just understanding what somebody's going through, but actually putting yourselves in your shoe and making it part of your purpose to learn what they're going through, not just saying, "Oh, I can understand. I think I understand what you're talking about." So all of those things, I think, are what makes for citizens going forward, and how we can do better for each other. And that was in 2013, and I've been on the journey since. But I'll pause and let you get a word in edgewise.
Yeah, well, that's amazing. That's so much about what the Create a Life You Love community and the Create a Life You Love podcast is about, is something in our lives, some experience partnered with our unique talents and skills and gifts creates this like purpose, this drive inside us that we could not have predicted while we were younger, right? But it all somehow comes together. Hindsight's 2020. Um, but yeah, so you were not at Columbine. You did not have a child at Columbine, but it impacted you. I remember being at the gym on a treadmill next to my mom in Virginia and watching that all happen. And I mean, it impacted everybody. It was a tragedy. Um, and then for you to take that and take your talents and skills. Obviously, you were probably a good writer and enjoyed writing prior to releasing your first book. And you have multiple now. Is that correct?
That is correct.
Yeah, and then all these amazing articles. And so you were able to combine all of it together and then help others. And it's a growth journey too, because you are also growing as you're doing all that. So it's perfect. Perfect.
And one of those 5 steps, maybe the one that I consider the most from a growth standpoint is forgiveness.
Mm,
That is, when your 4-year-old whacks your 2-year-old upside the head, and you tell your 4-year-old, tell your sister you're sorry. I'm sorry. That's a different kind of forgiveness than what a 14-year-old, a 24-year-old, a 44-year-old, 64-year-old should do. You should learn, you should evolve in your forgiveness journey, whether
mm,
you're a person of faith or not a person of faith. Forgiveness is an intrinsic part of being a human, or should be anyway. And I love the words of Maury Schwartz in the little book Tuesdays with Maury. And if you've heard of that, it's a sports writer was found out that his esteemed college professor was dying of amyotrophic lateral sclerosis, and went to visit him every Tuesday and sort of heard his life lessons. And what I'm simplifying, but when he talked about forgiveness, he said, forgive yourself first for what you have done or not done, then forgive others and do it now. And so I've been sort of trying to understand that, and reading a lot about forgiveness and reading a lot about horrific things, the Rwanda massacre and other folks, and how can they forgive, much like some of the journey you've been on. How do I really learn how to do this? And I've learned that forgiveness is not just personal. There's also this communal forgiveness that is, for example, the American Medical Association many years ago did not allow Black physicians.
mm,
And I don't know when they started allowing them again, but 15 years ago, they wrote an article accepting their misdeeds and extending an apology, asking for forgiveness. Now, one could easily argue, wasn't me, I didn't do it. Why should I say anything? But it was us. And if we take those 12 words to heart that I talked about at the beginning, I am the problem, I am the solution, I am the resource. Let's substitute the pronoun. We are the problem. We are the solution. We are the resource. So it's up to us to accept past misdeeds. And it's up to us to help those past misdeeds reset our moral compass going forward. And so all those parenting, involvement, love, and forgiveness are sort of all weaved into what I think is sort of help us. And it's pushed me along this journey to talking even about conscious parenting and these other things.
Yeah, so in your book, Conscious Parenting, you discuss parental awareness threshold. Can you explain like what that is and how parents can use it successfully?
Yeah, let me give you a little background to that. Late in my career, I made a professional change. I took a position of more leadership, and I had to take a leadership course at the institution. I go, oh, do I have to do this? But I was much better for it. And in that course, and I'm simplifying, they talk about conscious leadership. And when you're a conscious leader, you're above the line. You're open, you're receptive, you're ready to learn. If you're unconscious leader, you're below the line. You're closed, you're defensive, you're always right. And the whole point about conscious leadership is just knowing where you are. We're all going to be above and below the line. And we've all been in that 3 o'clock meeting when we're just sort of sitting there silent, going, when is this thing going to be over? I am so bored. And so that you can just sit there and say, okay, I'll just sit here until it's done. Or you can say, oh, golly gee, I'm below the line. What can I do to be more interactive and be more of a participant in this process? I think the same thing applies for parenting. And so I've taken that line that somebody else came up with and talked about the parental awareness threshold. When you're above the parental awareness threshold, you're open, you're receptive, you're ready to learn. When you're below, you're closed, you're defensive because I said so, because I'm the parent. And we're all going to be above and below that parental awareness threshold because we're human, because we're parents. And the whole point is just being consciously aware of where you are. And if when you're in that stressed position, if you're consciously aware of it, hopefully what you can do is pause, assess, and choose. Hopefully you can choose a better response. But if you're not consciously aware in the moment, hopefully you can do it in retrospect, because we're all going to screw up. I mean, I'm a parent. I don't have enough fingers and toes to tell you the number of times I've made boo-boos. But the whole point is how we can learn and consciously change for the better going forward. And so, as we're down this parenting journey, as we're hopefully re- recognizing it's a lifelong journey and learning, then how can we try to understand and alter our responses accordingly? Because it's so important as parents to understand the developmental stage of your child.
Mm.
I mean, you expected something different out of a 1-year-old, a 3-year-old, 5-year-old, 10-year-old, 15-year-old. And so you have to adapt. Plus, every interaction that a parent has can be very different depending on their own set of circumstances. Are they tired? Have they had any sleep? Are they having spousal problems? Is there an illness in the family? I mean, all those things weigh on every human interaction we have. And sometimes you can put them to the side to make responses, but usually they're there in some way, shape, or form. And when they help you, great. When they're detrimental, then just try to learn from that experience. That's what I'm talking about, conscious parenting and the parental awareness threshold.
Awesome. And so, will you share with us like how many children you have?
I have, I jokingly say I have two only children. I have a 43-year-old from my first marriage, and he and his wife, we now have a almost 1-year-old grandbaby. Uh, and she's gorgeous. She's the cutest kid I've ever seen. Uh, my youngest son got married a couple years ago, and we have a 9-year-old step granddaughter.
Oh,
So I have two grandchildren and two boys.
wonderful. And so, obviously, like, so something about Columbine hit you, and there's children in that school. Um, do you, what do you feel led you really down like the parenting, that was going to be your niche?
Well, when I got into pediatrics, so much of pediatrics is advice about parenting.
Mm.
Um, and even when I started pediatrics, I hadn't had a child then. But when I finished my training, I had a child. But still, I don't think it's several years into becoming a parent that you have and a professional at the same time that you really learn the mix of the two. Professionals can sort of learn what the books say and what their mentors say and learn from but until they're actually in that circumstance, when you say, I just can't take this anymore, what am I going to do? And all the doctor says is, well, just do this. And nobody can humanly do that, so you finally learn what it's like. And so my parenting skills have increased tremendously over the years as I've had thousands and thousands of interactions. But it's also the same thing has happened because I'm in medical genetics. So many of the things I do with medical genetics are giving information that is very emotionally laden, talking about children that have significant birth defects or potential develop or intellectual disability. And so forming a bond with families so I can explain and we can go over what that means instead of just dropping a bombshell in the room and walking out and say good luck.
Oh man,
So
yes.
much of what I have done over the years is try to create a trusting relationship with families so they trust me and I trust them.
Yeah, and so that's the second time you've mentioned kind of trust in relationships. So it's important adult to adult to have trust in relationships and adult to child. And then I'm sure that also applies like in the community, in the we collective as well.
Oh, absolutely. And Trust is based on so many things, but one of the significant factors of trust is truth telling.
Mm, yeah,
Uh, when somebody says, trust me, that you can only do that if you know from experience that they are telling the truth.
that
And
they're
they're trying,
trustworthy.
yeah.
Yeah. Oh man. Um, so I love that you talk about a journey because I sign everything, enjoy the journey, and everything's a journey in the create a life you love world. And so, what are some like useful signposts or maps that you've discovered along the way?
Well, I like the word map because some people consider parenting sort of an innate skill. You give birth, and all of a sudden, everyone says, "Oh, it'll just come to you." That's not the case at all. Parenting is not innate, especially in today's complex, technologically technologic society. There's so much advice that needs to be given and heeded. So the major some of the significant milestones are uh, having a trusted professional to help you along the way, whether that's my bias as a pediatrician, but it can certainly be nurse practitioner, family practice physician, or a variety of medical professionals. Um, Sometimes it's your parents and sometimes it's not. And when I say that, I say that a little tongue in cheek because a lot of mothers will say, I just don't trust anything my mother says. And I said, what you always need to do is when the grandmother or the mother tells you something, just smile and say thank you, and then do what you're going to do. so, um, so sometimes it's the grandparents, but you certainly need support. You definitely need support in so many different ways, and that support might evolve over time. Be willing to listen and learn from this process, and uh, the remember as your child gets older, remember love is unconditional.
Mm,
Someone's behavior is not unconditional. So when a child does something that is wrong, you don't hate the child. You might hate the behavior, but I wouldn't even use the word hate because it so easily comes off the tongue. But when you want to change a child's behavior, you want to remember that the word discipline, the root word for discipline is disciple, which
mm,
means to teach. So you're not trying to punish the child, you're trying to teach them. You're trying to make this change a learning experience. And so discipline should be a learning experience. And then the other big thing along the way, I think, is forgiveness.
mm,
Forgive your child for things, but forgive yourself. I'll give you an example. When my youngest son was about 7 or 8, he said something one night that really set me off, and I was really angry. And I yelled at him, and my wife yelled at me. And so we went into that family meltdown mode where nobody talks. Everyone just walks past each other for a couple hours. I'm sure that was never in your family,
oh,
but it no.
never.
Um, but when it was time for bed, I laid down with my son. I said, "Son, I'm so sorry. You did something I think was wrong, but Dad's response was totally inappropriate. And I want to tell you I'm sorry. I want to apologize. We're in this together, and I want us to work." He said, "Dad, would you be quiet?" I said, "Why?" He said, "I hate it when you're nice." So, and I don't say that to pat myself on the back, but I just say that acknowledge when you're wrong, accept accept when you're wrong, and move on. And I think that's where we're not engaging enough. And obviously, that goes far beyond parenting. That goes with almost everything we have in terms of interpersonal relationships. Um, so forgiveness for me has been a significant milepost
Mm,
along the way in terms of being able to accept that. And there are times when I say things that my wife reminds me, "Ooh, that doesn't sound very forgiving," and she's right. I'm human. I let my emotions get the best of me. So it's nice to have that um, parrot on your shoulder,
yep.
reminding you of of your human nature.
That trusted, safe person in your bubble that can
Yes, absolutely.
lovingly call you out on things and help
Uh,
you see things.
Yes.
That's awesome. So, yes. And so I know you do other things in your community because community is so important to you. And so, what other ways are you involved in the community outside of medicine?
Well, medicine kept me totally engaged near the end because when I switched jobs, I had an hour commute each way for the last 8 years of my career, and so I just retired a year ago, and so the other thing I'm the other thing I'm doing in my community is I'm the president of the South Carolina chapter of the American Academy of Pediatrics. So
Oh,
I'm trying to help lead children's advocacy here in the state of South Carolina for the 700 plus pediatricians that are a member of that organization. So, and then the other thing I'm doing in it, so I think involvement sort of morphs into different things. The other thing, I'm still writing op-ed articles for the local newspaper, and I'm putting them on my blog. Um, and I'm working on another writing project in addition to the conscious parenting, uh, sort of about what really matters in terms of what I think really matters.
yeah. Excuse me, sorry. Um, that's great. So tell us the titles of your books and where they can get them. Are they all available on Amazon or is a website a better place to go?
The best place to find them in one fell swoop is my website, which is mychildren'schildren.com. And there's that website was purposely chosen also, my children's children, for I was talking to my grandchildren, my children's children, my children's children, talking to the children I've cared for over the years, and talking to the children that I've advocated for. So pediatricians, whether they're are very paternalistic or maternalistic, your kids are our kids, and so we see that as a joint parenting exercise. So my children's children, raising young citizens in the age of Columbine, is there. I have a children's book that goes along with that. It's called All About Children. And that's really, I call it Goodnight Moon with a Message because it's a series of 13 illustrations that somebody else beautifully did. And then there's messages there. So there's, visiting a military cemetery, visiting a senior center, going to the animal shelter, having dinner together, watching TV or reading with the TV off, a variety of things. There's a more scientific or medical book called Thinking Developmentally, where we talk about early brain and child development, the science, and then what to do about it. And then the most recent one is Conscious Parenting using the Parental Awareness Threshold. And all of that is you can see on my website. And there's also a contact page there. And I have an ongoing blog also.
Awesome. I did just drop that website in the chat for those of you with us live, and then it will also be in the show notes if you're listening on the podcast at a later date. Uh, so I'd love for you to touch base real quick before we jumped on live. You mentioned that you did some foster parenting and that it was with kids with special needs. And just because, my career is as a special educator, and so many of the people in my community walk that path as well or have at some point in their life, I'd love for you to just share a little bit about that.
Yeah, I actually started my career in medicine as a part-time or as foster parent for a year or so, and then finished my career in medicine as a primary care provider for children with special health care needs. My first wife and I were foster parents for several children that had significant physical problems. One child had had a rubella infection when their mother was pregnant, and because of that, had heart disease, vision problems, and hearing problems. So when we took over his care, he was 9 years old and not potty trained. That was quite a task, but that was. But we like a lot of folks found out that we were sort of in over our head, and had to move on And then we had some other children that was so many years ago, I can't remember now. But it was a very eye-opening journey. And as I finished my career, I worked as a primary care doctor in a clinic for children with complex healthcare needs,
Mm.
children that had significant intellectual disability, children that had tracheostomy tubes in, children that had feeding tubes in, children that had intractable seizures. And I can't tell you how much I learned from those children and how much I learned from those parents. Uh,
Yes.
Leaving that was very difficult, but it was time to retire. But they made it very difficult for me over the last 6 months, and I told them I was retiring. Mothers breaking down in tears, and me breaking down in tears. So it was, but the resilience of people is just amazing. So
Yes.
long as they have resources and love, because it's not all intrinsic for these families. They need help, and it's not just a one-time deal. It's persistent, and in many
Absolutely.
ways we all do.
Yeah. So I live in the biggest city in Kansas, Wichita, and so we're very blessed with lots of resources for our families that we work with. But there's so many rural places that support those systems. The resources just are very, very different depending on where you're located, and um, yeah, it makes a huge difference. But then also the support of the family. When you've got the extended generations all within the same town and everybody's helping out versus a single mom who doesn't have any family in the same city. So yeah.
And I mean, I wrote an article recently. Not sure I can remember all the things, all the take-home messages they had at the end, but I can remember a couple. One is whenever you're going into a room, leave your bias at the door.
Mm,
Your preconceived notion might be totally thrown off once you finally meet this family,
yeah.
and you have ongoing discussions. Listen intently,
Hmm.
um, and always remember your humanity. You might someday, if not sooner than later, be on the opposite side of that encounter. Um,
Yeah. Definitely. Wonderful. Um, any like overarching tip for somebody who, if they're a parent or an educator or a pediatrician, they're working with children in some way and they want to help develop good citizens in our community?
well, I mean, my bias is I love my book.
Right? Yeah.
Conscious parenting. It's purposely short. It's purposely so people can read it quickly and then refer back to it with lots of different guidance and examples at different ages. It's a conscious awareness of where you are and where your child is. And again, somebody asked me a one word sort of a summary of sort of my journey. That would probably be trying to understand and learn forgiveness.
Mm, yeah. That's been a big underlying theme throughout our discussion tonight is the really importance of forgiveness. And whew, that can be a challenge depending on what you've been through. Um,
Right. Oh, absolutely. And that's not I mean, scars break open at times. I mean, my
mm,
father was an alcoholic and was abusive to my mother, not physically as much as verbally, and was in and out of our lives and almost killed us once with the drunk driving. So, and he's been dead for over 40 years, and I still have problems at times. So I don't mean to set myself up as being perfect in this journey.
oh, absolutely. Yeah. If anybody ever claims to be perfect on the journey, like, yeah, that's not not possible. Yeah. Um, yeah, so then that's really hard too with him already being passed. Like, yes, it's inner work of you forgiving and it's not hurting anybody else but you, but still those scars, I can't imagine. So, and we all have our own.
Right. And then the other thing, obviously, is again, those 12 words have really had a profound impact. I am the problem. I am the solution.
Mm,
I am the resource. they've really sort of been, in many ways, a guiding light for me over the last 30 plus years.
I
That
love,
was totally unanticipated when I just went into pediatrics.
yeah. So, but your journey has led you to your purpose and to your passion and to now you're making an impact. That's amazing.
Yeah, I've retired, but I'm not. I refuse to withdraw. I mean,
Yeah.
so I will keep fighting for children and families and community improvement until they put me under.
Amazing. Amazing. Um, One of the things I love the most about your I am the problem or yeah, I'm the problem solution and resource is I think we oftentimes get stuck on the problem and it's external. That's the problem over there, and we're going to stand back and admire it and talk about it and stew in it and get upset about it. We don't, it's hard then to transition to the okay, what is the solution? And not just what is the solution, like how can I be the solution? And then how can I be a resource to this? And also, what are the other resources available to
Yeah,
help with the solution?
yeah. So it
Yeah.
becomes the I becomes the we.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Wonderful. Well, I love to ask all of my guests if they have any daily non negotiables.
Daily non-negotiables. Um, I can't think of any.
And some background on that, so maybe this will spark something. Is I work with my clients on that it's the tiny little daily habits and routines that you're disciplined with that lead to the big growth. It's not the giant, I published a book today, woo! It's the, okay, but every day for 90 days you sat down and you made sure you wrote 500 words. Good, bad, ugly. Like you were disciplined with it, or those numbers are made up, but
Right.
um, so to have so many books, to have the education you have and the success that you've had, there's got to be something that just really.
You know, I heard a talk recently about distractibility and about how you want to try to avoid distractibility. And I guess I relish distractibility because that takes me on paths I had no anticipation of going on.
Mm,
So I'm easily distracted, uh, but I'm okay with that. And So I'm chasing squirrels a lot around the neighborhood, and my to-do list sometimes is all over. And I try to. So non-negotiables. I'm not sure I can. I mean, to exercise my inner purpose, but I don't know that I um, consciously um, do that. I think I subconsciously do it because
mhm,
of because of where I am, and because one of the things I want to be as I go older is not just age. I want to become a sage.
mm,
I don't want to become elderly. I want to become an elder.
mm.
And so every day I get older and looking at the end, and it's not attractive. Um, but I want to savor each day in whatever way I can. And some days that might be the simple, mundane things I need to do for checking my wife's insurance, and that's okay. Some days it might be something that's going to have a dramatic impact on for children in South Carolina. So I accept them all. I used to be very upset with the drudgery of life and medicine, but I'm okay now.
That's huge. And that's part two of the daily habits because it starts as I'm going to start this habit, I'm going to start this routine, and you consciously think of it, but eventually it becomes subconscious and it becomes part of who you are. And
Yeah.
that's really where then at some point you look back behind you and you're like, whoa, there was a lot of growth.
So I hope that's where I am. If
Yeah, no, I love it.
I'm gonna say I am, and I'll stick with it.
I love it. I accept it. Awesome. Well, thank you everybody for joining us. Thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to share with us your wisdom. And Yeah, just make sure to go check out Dr. Bob's books on the website. There's several of them. There's going to be something for everybody, whether it's for you, for a child. I'm pretty sure one of them that you said, like, when we get off, I'm going to go look. I'm pretty sure I actually have that one for a training that I give. So, um, and if anybody got value out of the episode, please be sure to share it with someone that you think would also benefit from it. Sharing is caring. And leaving a podcast review and a book review wherever you buy the book from is always very much appreciated. So, thank you again, everybody. Enjoy the journey. Thank you for listening to the Create a Life You Love podcast. I would love to hear from you about your biggest takeaways. Share them with me on Facebook or Instagram at Create a Life You Love Coaching. If you love this podcast, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. It's very much appreciated. That's it for now. Enjoy the journey.